The safari jeep jolted over a bump, sending Lily's stuffed giraffe tumbling to the dusty floor. She didn't bother picking it up, because her parents were fighting. Again. Maybe if you actually listened to the guide, we wouldn't have gotten lost, Mom snapped, gripping the side of the jeep as they hit another pothole. Oh, so now it's my fault? Maybe if someone hadn't insisted on bringing half the house with us, we'd be on schedule. Dad shot back, his face bright red, flushed with frustration. Lily clenched her jaw, staring out at the endless golden savanna. This was supposed to be a dream trip, a real safari just like in the movies. She had imagined adventure, spotting lions, watching giraffes, maybe even seeing a baby elephant up close. Instead, she was stuck in the middle of another argument. The safari guide, an older man with sun-weathered skin, cleared his throat. Folks, if you look to your left, you'll see a troop of gorillas. Pretty rare to catch them this close. Lily barely reacted. Even the promise of gorillas couldn't pull her out of her growing frustration. But then, movement. A huge silverback gorilla sat just a few feet from their jeep, watching. His dark eyes flicked between Mom and Dad, who were still bickering, and next to him, a younger gorilla was moving strangely. Something was off. Lily blinked. One gorilla had crossed its arms and turned its back, just like Mom. Another threw its hands in the air in an exaggerated, frustrated motion, just like Dad had done 2 seconds ago. Lily's breath caught. Were they copying them? She looked from the gorillas to her parents, then back again. And that's when the silverback did something that made her jaw drop. It let out a loud, dramatic sigh, just like Mom. Lily's lips twitched. The guide covered his mouth. Even the other tourists in the jeep started to notice, and then one of the younger gorillas threw its hands up and stomped in a circle, shaking its head like an angry cartoon character. It was a perfect imitation of Dad. Lily's heart pounded, and before she could stop it, laughter burst out of her mouth. Loud, uncontrollable, belly-aching laughter. Because somehow, in the middle of the African savanna, a group of wild gorillas was roasting her parents. Mom and Dad froze. Slowly, they turned toward the gorillas and watched. The gorillas kept going, the arms-crossed stance, the exaggerated size, the frustrated stomping. The whole troop was in on it. Dad's face went slack. Mom blinked, then narrowed her eyes. "Are they making fun of us?" The guide chuckled. "Well, looks like they think you two are being ridiculous." Lily gasped for air between laughs. "Even the gorillas are sick of you guys fighting?" And at that moment, everything shifted. The tension in the jeep? Gone. Mom covered her face, shaking her head. Dad ran a hand down his face, sighing, but this time it wasn't an angry sigh. It was embarrassed. The gorillas hooted and pounded the ground like they had just delivered the best joke of the year. And honestly, they had. For a second, the jeep was silent, except for Lily's giggles. Mom and Dad just sat there, stunned, watching their wild audience. And then the gorillas took it up a notch, the same silverback that had sighed like Mom. He slowly turned his back again, making an exaggerated show of ignoring the others, then peeked over his shoulder, as if waiting for someone to apologize, just like Mom always did. One of the younger gorillas, the drama queen of the troop, huffed, pounded its chest, then stomped in a circle before throwing itself onto the ground like a toddler throwing a tantrum. It was a perfect imitation of how Dad had just reacted. Lily clapped a hand over her mouth, tears forming in her eyes from laughing too hard. The safari guide shook his head, barely containing his own laughter. "Well, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I gotta say, this is a first." Mom pointed at the silverback, jaw dropped. "He just did my sigh. Did you see that? He did my sigh." Dad was still staring at the gorilla tantrum. "That one was me, wasn't it?" Lily nodded, barely breathing between giggles. "Yeah, Dad, that was definitely you." And then something even weirder happened. The biggest gorilla, the alpha silverback, was watching all of this play out. But instead of joining in, he did something unexpected. A small baby gorilla waddled toward him, tripping over its own feet. The little thing fell face first into the dirt. Lily winced. Ouch! The baby let out a tiny, high-pitched cry. The silverback immediately scooped it up, cradling it like a parent comforting a child. He gently patted its back, gave it a few reassuring grunts, then set it down carefully. Lily stared. Then her parents stared, because after watching this massive, 400-pound wild animal handle a crying baby with more patience than either of them had all day, something clicked. Lily turned toward them, a mischievous glint in her eye. "See? Even gorillas are better at parenting than you guys." The safari guide let out a choked laugh. And that was the moment it hit them. Mom sighed. Not her usual annoyed sigh, but a real, deep, wow we screwed up sigh. Dad exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Oh my God, we just got parenting advice. From gorillas." Lily grinned. "Yeah, and they made fun of you first." Mom groaned, shaking her head. "Oh my God, we're the problem, aren't we?" Dad threw up his hands in surrender. "Yep, we just got called out by monkeys." The safari guide choked on his laughter. "Technically, they're apes, but yeah, that just happened." Mom covered her face, groaning again. Dad was laughing now, shaking his head. "And Lily?" She felt lighter than she had all day. For the first time in hours, her parents weren't fighting. And the gorillas, they just sat there, smug as hell. The silverback gave one last look at Lily's parents. Then, with the slow deliberateness of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, he rolled his eyes. Lily lost it. For the first time all day, Lily's parents weren't talking or arguing. They were just sitting there, staring at the troop of gorillas who had just humiliated them in the most ridiculous way possible. The weight of the realization sank in slowly, like the delayed sting of a slap. The silverback's eye roll had been the final blow, one last sarcastic jab from an animal that, apparently, had better emotional intelligence than two full-grown adults. Mom let out a slow breath and finally turned to Lily, her expression shifting from embarrassment to something softer. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said, reaching for Lily's hand. "We didn't mean to ruin today?" Dad nodded beside her, his frustration now replaced with something that looked like regret. "Yeah, this was supposed to be fun. We got caught up in dumb stuff." Lily squeezed her mom's hand, but didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The gorillas had already done all the talking. The moment was tender, something fragile that she didn't want to break. And then, as if sensing the shift in energy, the silverback let out a deep grunting sigh before plopping onto his side, resting his massive head on the dirt. A baby gorilla immediately clambered onto him, using his stomach like a pillow. Another one poked at his ear before curling up beside him. The sight was almost ridiculous, a creature so enormous, so powerful, yet so patient, so gentle. He had no problem letting the smaller gorillas climb all over him, tugging at his fur, poking at his face. He wasn't bothered. He didn't yell. He didn't snap. He just lay there, completely unfazed, a living jungle gym for a troop of tiny troublemakers. Lily's dad exhaled sharply, watching the scene unfold. "Man," he muttered, shaking his head, "that gorilla's got more patience than I do." Lily smirked. "I know." Mom nudged Dad playfully. "Maybe you should take notes." "Maybe we should take notes," Dad corrected, smirking right back. Lily couldn't help but laugh, and for the first time that day, it wasn't forced. The tension that had been sitting in her chest all morning was finally gone, replaced with something light, something warm. The gorillas had done what hours of bickering and frustration couldn't. They had reminded her parents what actually mattered. As the jeep started to roll forward, the silverback lifted his head and met Lily's gaze one last time. For a second, she could have sworn there was something knowing in his eyes. Then, in the most casual, dismissive, and human way possible, he turned his back on them. It was over. They had been dismissed. Lily burst out laughing all over again. As the jeep rumbled forward, the Williams family sat in stunned silence, still processing the absolute roasting they had just endured from a troop of gorillas. Mom sighed, shaking her head. I can't believe we just got parenting advice from a bunch of apes. Dad exhaled, staring out at the passing savannah. I mean, to be fair, they kind of nailed it. Lily, still grinning, leaned forward against the railing, watching the gorillas grow smaller in the distance. So, does this mean if you guys start fighting again, I can just roll my eyes and grunt at you? Mom shot her a look, but she was smiling. Try it and see what happens. Dad chuckled, stretching his arms behind his head. Honestly, we probably deserve it. For the first time that day, everything felt right. No bickering, no stress. Just the three of them, enjoying the moment together. The guide, still chuckling to himself, drove them toward the next area of the reserve, pointing out elephants in the distance. But Lily kept glancing back, her gaze drawn toward the gorillas one last time. That's when she noticed it. The silverback, the same judgmental, drama-loving, parenting expert gorilla who had been at the center of their humiliation, was still watching them. He was seated on a large rock now, legs spread wide, arms resting over his belly, like a dad who just finished a Thanksgiving dinner. He wasn't moving. He was just staring. Lily nudged her dad. He's still looking at us." Dad turned, and sure enough, there he was, silent, motionless, judging. Mom turned too. Oh God, what now? Then, in the most dramatic, slow-motion way possible, the silverback lifted one massive hand and waved. Lily's jaw dropped. Mom clapped a hand over her mouth. Dad's eyebrows shot up. Did that gorilla just... Before he could finish, the gorilla did something even worse. He tilted his head slightly, raised an eyebrow, and rolled his eyes. That was it. That was the moment. Lily lost it. She doubled over, clutching her stomach, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. He did it again. He's still roasting you guys. Mom let out a groan and collapsed into her seat. I hate everything. Dad stared at the gorilla, hands on his hips, then let out a defeated sigh. You win, big guy. He gave the silverback a respectful nod, then turned back to Lily, shaking his head with a smirk. Later that evening, back at the Safari Lodge gift shop, Lily spotted something that made the whole day even better. A stuffed gorilla. Not just any stuffed gorilla, a big, smug-looking one, arms crossed with a stitched-on expression that practically screamed, "I'm judging you." She had to have it. When they got back to their lodge room, she held it up to her parents, wiggling its little arms dramatically. In her best gorilla voice, she let out an exaggerated sigh. Ugh, I guess I have to parent these humans too. Dad burst out laughing. Mom covered her face. Lily grinned. Best safari ever. And somewhere out there, deep in the African savannah, a real gorilla sat on a rock, still judging them. And honestly, they wouldn't have it any other way. And that's how a 400-pound silverback ended up being the best parenting coach this family never asked for. Sometimes, life hands you lessons in the most unexpected ways. Maybe it's through a wise mentor, maybe it's through personal experience, or maybe, just maybe, it's through a gorilla with an attitude. Because if a wild animal can show more patience, emotional intelligence, and humor than two full-grown adults, well, there's hope for the rest of us. So next time you find yourself in a pointless argument, just remember, somewhere out there a gorilla is probably rolling his eyes at you. And honestly, he's got a point. Thanks for watching. If this story made you laugh, hit the like button. Subscribe for more wild stories and tell us in the comments, what's the funniest thing you've ever seen an animal do?